All right, let me just disable font size, letter spacing, and line height. Now look at these designs. Boring, flat, just plain text. No rhythm, no hierarchy, no life. Let me enable font size, letter spacing, and line height again. Now look at the same designs again. The layout is exactly the same, the images are still the same, and the only thing I changed was typography. Typography is almost invisible when it's working. You don't notice it, but the moment it's wrong, everything suddenly feels uncomfortable. Most people think typography is about choosing fonts, but fonts are actually the smallest part of it. But this was not always the case. In the early days of the web, designers had no choice. Everyone used the same 5 fonts. There was not much to decide. Typography was simple. Then browsers got better. And suddenly, you could load any font on a website. And also, Google released Google Fonts, which gave us access to thousands of free fonts. And designers went crazy. They started using 2 fonts, then 3, and sometimes even 5 fonts on the same page, which, instead of making things better, actually made designs feel more cluttered and harder to follow. And that's why today, being a web designer isn't just about picking a font and placing it on a page like it used to be. You need to understand typography. You need to know how to make it work, how it behaves, how people read it, and how it shapes perception. And that starts with one simple decision. How many fonts do we use for a website? If you're just starting out, the answer is simple. Use only one font. Because one good font already comes with many variations. Thin, light, regular, medium, bold, extra bold, and more. With just these variations, you can create an entire website with proper hierarchy. You can use bigger and bolder fonts for heading, medium one for subheadings, and regular for the paragraphs, all without adding a second font. Finding fonts with multiple variations is easy now. Just go to Google Fonts and use the sidebar to filter by the number of styles you need. You'll get a huge selection of fonts to choose from. And once you've decided on a font, people think the job is done. But that's exactly where the real work begins. If you want to master the art of typography, the first thing that you need to do is master the art of spacing. There are 2 types of spacing in typography, the vertical spacing and horizontal spacing. Vertical spacing is your line height, the space between each line of text. Horizontal spacing is your letter spacing, the space between each character. Before we go deeper, it's important to understand how browsers handle this by default, whether it's Chrome, Safari, or Firefox. By default, browsers set the line height to about 1.2 and letter spacing to 0. It might look good for some text blocks, but for most part, we need to adjust. Many designers leave the default settings as it is. That's why good fonts or even premium fonts can end up looking bad, simply because the line height and letter spacing were never adjusted. So let's talk about how to fix that. Let's start with line height, the vertical space between lines of text. There's a simple rule you can follow. Smaller font size needs more line height, and the larger font size needs less line height. For example, in this case, both the heading and the paragraph are set to a line height of 1.2. That works well for the heading because larger text usually looks better with tighter spacing. But for the paragraph, 1.2 feels too tight. The lines are too close to each other, which makes it harder to read. Now, if we increase the paragraph line height to 1.5, the text gets more breathing space. It feels more open and much easier to read. But that same 1.5 would look too loose for a large heading. It starts to feel disconnected. The best balance would be 1.2 line height for the heading and 1.5 for the small paragraph. But don't get me wrong here. I'm not saying you should always use 1.2 for headings and 1.5 for paragraphs. You need to adjust this based on the font size and the font you are using, because every fonts are different. Sometimes, a paragraph might look better at 1.3 line height. Sometimes, the heading might need 1.4 line height. It's all case by case. Like for serif fonts, it usually need a bit more line height than sans serif fonts because they have more details and take up more space. Another thing that affects line height is the width of your text. For example, if I set the line height to 1.5 for a narrow block of text, it looks fine. But the same 1.5 can feel a little tight when the text stretches wider. In that case, increasing it slightly, like to 1.6, makes it much easier to read. So line height is not just about font size. It also depends on how wide your text is. So the simple rule: wider the text block, more the line height. Now let's look at horizontal spacing, which is letter spacing. Letter spacing follows the same idea as well. Smaller text needs a little more space between the letters, and larger text needs less. By default, browsers keep letter spacing at 0. Sometimes that's fine, but often you need to adjust it based on the size of your text. In most cases, paragraph text can stay at 0. But for larger headings, you might need to reduce it slightly, like -2 or -3. Yes, negative letter spacing. Because when text gets bigger, the space between letters also feels bigger. Tightening it brings everything back into balance. You also need to adjust it for different screen sizes like tablets and mobile. Most people set their font size, line height, and spacing for desktop and leave it there. But that doesn't work well on smaller screens. On mobile, the font size is usually smaller than on desktop. And when the font size changes, the line height and letter spacing needs to be adjusted as well. So you cannot treat spacing as fixed or a one-time thing. It needs to change based on the font, text width, and the screen size. When someone lands on your page, they make a decision in less than a second. That decision is not random. You control it. And the way you control it is through hierarchy. And in typography, hierarchy comes from two things: size and weight. If your heading, subheading, and body text all look similar in size, the reader does not know where to start. Everything feels equally important, which means nothing feels important. The same is true for weight. If everything is regular weight, nothing stands out. This is why hierarchy is one of the most important things to get right in typography. Hierarchy is your way of telling the reader, this is important, this is less important, and this is just the detail. Without it, your design has no order, no direction, no flow. But the moment you put a bold heading next to a regular paragraph, the eye immediately knows what to read first. To build proper hierarchy in your typography, you can start with font size. Some designers just pick sizes by feel, bigger for headings, smaller for body text. But there is a much better and more reliable way to do this. It is called a typographic scale. Instead of guessing, you pick a ratio and multiply. The most common ratios are 1.25, 1.333, and 1.5. Let me give you a quick example. Say your body text is 16 pixels, and you go with a ratio of 1.333. Your subheading becomes around 21 pixels. Your heading becomes around 28. Your display title becomes around 37. Every size is mathematically connected to the one before it. And that is exactly why it feels right when you see it. Now the reader does not have to think. Their eye moves naturally from the most important thing to the least important thing. The reader always knows where they are and where to go next. Look at this text. It stretches almost edge to edge. Your eyes have to travel all the way across the screen just to finish a single line. And by the time you reach the end, you almost lose where it began. Now compare it to this. The same text, but with a narrower width. Suddenly, it feels easier to read. Your eyes move naturally, line by line. This is line length. Line length is simply how wide your paragraph stretches across the screen. If the lines are too long, reading becomes tiring. If they are too short, reading becomes choppy. Many designers completely miss this principle of typography. A lot of websites, especially long-form articles, stretch text from edge to edge. And that makes reading harder. Your eyes have to travel too far, line after line. The simple fix is to bring the text into a comfortable reading zone. A good rule of thumb is around 60 to 80 characters per line. For mobile devices, text can go edge to edge, but the line length usually falls between 30 to 50 characters per line. If you follow the simple rule of line length, the reading feels effortless. Your eyes move naturally from one line to the next. No strain, no friction. Alright, if you are deep into web design, understanding these 3 principles of typography will help you a lot. Spacing, hierarchy, line length. Get these right, and you are already ahead of most designers out there. And always remember this: typography is never just one decision. It is a system. Every single choice you make affects the next one. If you want to go deeper into typography, I have also made a full tutorial with a lot more detail. You can check it out right here. And if you found this video helpful, give it a like and subscribe. It really does help me out. See you in the next one.